I want to welcome everyone tonight. I'm Jennifer Roberts, and I'm one of the two people who has been working with the Carter Center to bring you the North Carolina Trusted Elections Tour. And we are really pleased to see the turnout tonight. I am from neighboring Mecklenburg County, former mayor of Charlotte, former county commissioner. Did a lot of work with Gaston County commissioners, have been to Belmont many times. You have a lovely town. Spent a lot of time in Gaston County hiking Crowder's Mountain, another amazing amenity that you have here. And so thank you so much for coming tonight to hear from our election experts. I'm going to introduce in a minute my colleague in this tour, Bob Orr, because we are being very bipartisan. And so I'm on the left side of the aisle, he's on the right side, but we all care about democracy. And we also want to thank our partners who have helped put this tour together. The League of Women Voters of North Carolina. I know there's some league members here tonight. Thanks for coming. Also, the U.S. Veterans Hall of Fame that works very hard to get services to veterans and is also trying to put a Hall of Fame for veterans in North Carolina. And they have been tremendously helpful as well. I understand we also, here in Gaston County, we have several Gaston County, members of the Board of Election and some staff from the Boards of Election. So just want to thank you all for being here and for the work that you do every day of the year. Elections are not just once a year. Sometimes they're many times, but the work goes forever. Millions of Americans remain concerned about the legitimacy of our 2020 elections. And so our coalition is seeking to prevent this from becoming the normal in every election. Through the assistance and support of the Carter Center and the coalition, as I mentioned, we have formed a cross-partisan network of trusted leaders around our state to share our message and support for democracy. North Carolina is one of several states that the Carter Center is doing work in, and we were chosen because we are a swing state with some important elections on the ballot, and we have a history of some disruptions of elections and protests. We like to have our voices heard. And so we're one of the pilot states to see how can we help people understand more about the election process so that we support our democracy, we have honesty and civility during our elections, and we accept the results. And so we're getting candidates actually to sign a pledge as well to those basic democratic principles. And that website has just gone out this week. It's principledcandidates.org. And so if you know any candidates who can sign on to that, that would be terrific. So thanks again for listening. We are really pleased to have the experts here tonight. You're going to learn a lot, hear a lot of great stories. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague. Oh, one more thing. There are cookies and water on the table in case you missed it on the way in. Feel free to get up and get some. And with that, join me in welcoming former North Carolina Supreme Court Justice Bob Orr.
Hey, good evening. We got a good crowd for only offering cookies and water. I mean, if we up the food and beverages, we might draw thousands to these. Since Jennifer knows that lawyers are prone to rambling on for long periods of time, I have a short 2-minute written statement that I want to present to you to sort of set up the concept of tonight's program, but also the 14 congressional district tour that we've been doing across the state. And so let me begin by saying it was in December of 1776, about 245 miles northeast of here, that the framers of the North Carolina Constitution met in Halifax to establish for the first time a representative democracy for the people of this state. A foundational principle of their efforts, as set out in the Declaration of Rights, was a system of elections. And over the course of these last 246 years, that foundational concept of elections by the people has undergone enormous changes, changes that have strengthened and expanded the voting franchise. It's provided greater security for the electoral process, like secret ballots, and it's expanded the scope of public officials that we in North Carolina elect. The democratic principle of elections by the people is the fundamental foundation upon which our government and democracy are built. And today we have over 7,345,000 registered voters across the 100 counties of this state. We have professional staffers hired at the state level and local professionals hired by each county election board to administer those elections. And in an election year, some 25,000 other individuals of all political persuasions, our friends and our neighbors, work the polls over the course of the election period. The professional staffers handle candidate filings and preparation of ballots, while these non-staff individuals assist with pre-election day activities like early voting, absentee ballot requests, and submissions, in addition to election day voting and tabulation of votes, all which leads to the certification of the election results. These Herculean tasks are accomplished within a framework of laws enacted over the years by the General Assembly and regulations consistent with those laws as enacted by the State Board of Elections. And there are a comprehensive set of security measures in place to protect your right to vote and the accurate tabulation of those votes to determine election winners, and specific legal procedures are in place to allow challenges and complaints if any citizen feels that a violation of the law has taken place. And many people may take voting for granted, but as former President Dwight Eisenhower said, the future of the Republic is in the hands of the American voter. Our election officials, from Murphy to Manteo, from Edneyville to Edenton, from Belmont to Beaufort, work relentlessly to make sure that our elections, so vital to American democracy, proceed fairly, safely, and securely. And tonight we're going to hear how they work to make that happen. And so it's my pleasure to introduce the moderator for the evening, which individual who needs no introduction, star of stage, screen, and television news, Joe Bruno of WSOC TV. Please welcome Joe. All right.
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Joe Bruno. I am a reporter for Channel 9. I am so glad to be here and so glad to be out of the traffic on I-85 from Charlotte to Gaston County. We are here to talk about elections, but I'll tell you right now, I will vote for any candidate that promises to fix that interchange to get here. It is a pleasure to be here. Channel 9 has really gone above and beyond to highlight the voting process, from how it works to how the votes are counted. During the 2020 election, we put up a live stream of the Mecklenburg County Board of Elections counting absentee ballots. So John had a camera on him for maybe 8 hours just sorting through paper. I don't know how many people watched it and how exciting it possibly could have been, but that's just an example of how we want people to get to know how our votes are counted. So I'm going to introduce the panel here. Let's bring back up Bob Orr first, since we just heard from him. He is a retired Supreme Court Justice, the Republican nominee for 4 statewide races, the Court of Appeals, and the state Supreme Court. If only we had walkout music like a baseball or basketball game for all of our panel. The crowd goes wild. Our next panelist is Tori Krass. He is the Chief Information Security Officer for the North Carolina State Board of Elections on a contract through Woodstar Labs, a subsidiary of AUI Incorporated, overseeing the agency security program and security liaison for partner entities. He has been in the information technology industry for nearly 25 years with a strong career focus on cybersecurity for the past decade and is considered a subject matter expert in infrastructure, operations, and security with demonstrated leadership both at work and within the community. Our next panelist is Adam Reagan, who has served as the Director of Elections for Gaston County since May 2011. Prior to coming to Gaston County, he served as a compliance specialist and investigator in the Campaign Finance Division with the North Carolina State Board of Elections from December 2006 through May 2011. From September 2005 to December 2006, he worked at Robert Watkins and Company in Tampa, Florida as a consultant specializing in the preparation of federal campaign finance reports. Before entering the private sector, he worked at the Federal Election Commission in Washington, D.C. from May 1998 to September 2005 as a campaign finance analyst and assistant branch manager in the Reports Analysis Division. Our next panelist is Eddie Spies, a partner at Poynter Spruill in Raleigh. Over the course of his more than 50 years practicing law, Eddie has represented both plaintiffs and defendants in civil rights, gerrymandering, and elections litigation. He has also assisted many state and local government agencies in understanding their duties to citizens. And our final panelist is John Gresham, who serves as a Democratic member of the Mecklenburg County Board of Elections. He is also an attorney. He began his law practice in Charlotte in 1976 following 2 years of service as a law clerk for United States District Court Judge James B. McKeown in Charlotte. Gresham, as he is known to both colleagues and clients, was a partner with Ferguson Stein Chambers, Gresham, and Sumter until joining Tin Fulton, Walker, and Owen in 2011. Gresham's practice focuses on employment and labor litigation, public employee rights, constitutional law, personal injury, and general civil litigation. All right, well, thank you so much, panel, for being here. Now, we will open this up to questions. We'll be coming around with flashcards that you can write your question down on. It will be passed on to me, and I can ask it to the board on behalf of you, or we can pass a microphone around and you can ask the question directly to the board yourself, really whatever you are comfortable with. But if you have a question, we will make sure it gets asked. But we'll start with a softball for our panel, and I want to, you all can really talk about this based on your expertise. Just through your background, how confident are you that North Carolina's elections are safe and secure, and what from your background makes you able to say that?
I'll go ahead and start.
Yeah.
I've been the elections director in Gaston County for almost 11 years now. And I can say with 100% confidence our elections are safe, they're secure. Everything from voting machines to, Tori will talk about cybersecurity. It is a safe process. It is a transparent process. Our board meetings, which Mr. Gresham is on the Mecklenburg Board of Elections, but our board, we have a 5-member board, bipartisan board. It is a transparent process. Everything we do is open to the public. So with 100% confidence, our elections are safe and secure. So.
I would say sitting on the board, and as you may know, each Board of Elections has 5 members, 3 of whom are Democrats now, because the governor is a Democrat. When the governor is a Republican, there will be 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats. We get along well. We work together initially with the absentee ballots. We have a Democrat and a Republican look at each absentee ballot, and in the 2000 elections, there were probably 15 or 20,000. So there were long nights as we were sitting there making sure that the absentee ballot was proper. If there was an issue, quite often it's the signature of the voter was not there. They are returned, and the voter, if there is time, can either resubmit their absentee ballot, or they can decide not to and vote either early voting or on election day. So we are looking to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to vote if they have made that effort, and that we look carefully to make sure that there are no issues with the votes.
Well, my perspective is as a lawyer, and in the course of a number of lawsuits over the years, I've had the opportunity to work with and observe the work of elections officials at the state level and at the local level, and I can say with complete confidence that everybody I have met who is involved in the administration of our election system is diligent and honest and trustworthy and committed to doing it right. I doubt there's any state in the country that has a better set of elections officials than our state. We should be thankful for that, and I'm confident that they will continue to do that very fine work at this upcoming election and elections to come.
I'll try this one, see how it works. I think, I notice here Eddie has a copy of the North Carolina statutes dealing with elections. And what you need to know is there is a comprehensive set of laws and regulations that have been passed by Republicans and Democrats that provide a very specific structure and set of rules for how elections are supposed to be conducted. And as John was saying, you have a bipartisan group of election boards in every county of our state. You have 2 Republicans on the State Board of Elections, and the laws are passed by the General Assembly, and the Republican Party controls the General Assembly. And so there is this bipartisan process that has evolved over the years to provide a set of rules and a set of operational guidelines. And then you put into that the professionals that we have in each county to operate the elections. And it's not a perfect system. I mean, you think about having an election with 7.4 million people from Murphy to Manteo. They don't all vote, but in the last presidential election, what was it, 5.5 million people voted? It's an enormous process, and we have a lot of different offices that we have for election. And so it's really a challenge for our professional staffers, but they do it in a quintessential professional way and in a bipartisan or nonpartisan way. So to that extent, and I've heard them in this tour that Jennifer and I have been on all over the state, talk about their commitment to fair, safe, and secure elections.
And Tori, you have a cybersecurity background.
Send this down to Tori. We've left Tori without a microphone.
Yeah, Tori, just from your perspective, from the cybersecurity stance, how confident are you that North Carolina's elections are safe and secure?
Thanks. Very. So I think it starts with understanding that the folks that are involved in the elections process are nonpartisan in the office at the State Board of Election. We can't be party affiliated. We can't be one side or the other on this. We're here to serve everyone. And that means that we're focused on making sure that the system is secure, that the process is working properly, and that it is going to ensure that your vote, when you cast that vote, it's going to get counted. It's going to be counted correctly, and the results at the end of the night are going to be the proper results. So from a cybersecurity perspective, That also involves us not looking at this as an individual instance of a cyber activity happening, but a programmatic approach, and trying to establish those technology controls and those processes and procedures before anything happens, so that in the event that somebody actually does try to do something malicious with IT devices or whatnot, we have a way to detect what's going on, prevent bad things from happening, and if something were to happen, we have the capabilities to properly respond to that and remediate whatever that is in whenever it happens. So I think that's kind of a hopefully a good basis.
John and Adam, can you tell us a little bit about the voting machines that Mecklenburg and Gaston County use for their elections?
Yeah, in Gaston County and Mecklenburg are, they're radically different, I'll say, when it comes to voting machines. Gaston County, we use paper ballots. We've used paper ballots for many, many years, as long as I've been in Gaston, and actually before that. We use a machine to tabulate those paper ballots called the DS200, manufactured by ES&S, which is one of the two certified voting machine companies that can do business in the state of North Carolina, that are certified with the state of North Carolina. And then we have what we call an express vote, which is what in Gaston County we use it for ADA purposes, for voters who need a little assistance with voting. It's a touch screen, and then they can use that, and it produces a paper ballot that goes into the tabulator. In Mecklenburg, and I talk to Michael all the time. So Mecklenburg has they use express votes as their voting machine, and then they take those and put those into the tabulator as well. So their primary way of voting is through the express vote, whereas in Gaston we use paper ballots. So did I describe it well enough?
Yes, you did. And one thing to understand about the system we use, when you come in, once you have gone through determination that you're at the right polling place, that they have your information, you go to the machine, all of the various elections come up, you mark your choice. At the end, it tells you to go back and check to make sure that the choices you have made are the ones that you meant to make, that you have not at some point missed one. When you finish, you push a button, you get a card. The card has all of your choices. You have the ability to look at that card, and if you see a mistake, then you notify a poll worker and you can correct it. If you are satisfied with your vote, you take it over, and just like here that they do for the folks with ADHD, excuse me, you put it in, slide it into a tabulator. And the tabulator, at the end of the night, the tabulator or the voting machine are attached to no outside source. There's no email, there's no way to get to that machine. At the end of the night, there is they put in a flash drive. And the flash drive goes, they're driven to the elections board, where there are folks who are regular employees out to collect those. They go in, the flash drive is then read, and the votes for that precinct are tabulated. We do the same with early voting and the same with mail-in voting. It runs through the machine. The machine tells you when it's run through in our office for early voting or for mail-in voting that the totals are exactly the same. In other words, every one that goes in, and with, I don't know how many of you have voted by mail, but you notice you fill out a ballot by pen and ink, much as they would do here for all of their votes. If there is a problem and a vote is not tabulated because the circle isn't full, the Board of Elections takes a look at that particular vote and determines, again, a Democrat and a Republican, to determine what the correct markings are and make it where it will run through the machine, so that at the end of the night, every mail-in vote has been tabulated and the numbers add up. We count, when we are doing the mail-in ballots, we keep a count so we know exactly how many mail-in ballots we have looked at that night. And at the end of the night, that number must be the same number as the number of mail-in ballots that have been run through the machine. So no ballots are lost. If that number does not come up right, we do it again to make sure that there are the same number of mail-in ballots that we have looked at and approved and that have gone through the machine. So both ways, I think, are meant to make sure the voter knows that their vote has been counted. And at the end of the night, not only their vote, but their neighbors' votes have been counted.
John and Adam, are any of your machines connected to the internet?
No,
None.
heaven forbid.
So Tori, with that in mind, knowing that these machines are not connected to the internet, is it even possible for someone to hack into them?
Great question. I want to step back to the other one really quickly. So there's another important thing about the equipment and how that equipment comes to be in use in the state of North Carolina. So the first thing is that equipment has to go through a certification process. It has to be reviewed. It has to be looked at by EAC. And Adam, correct me if I go sideways on this. So that's the first thing, is that it's looked at that level. They go through their checks, they send it off, have it tested, it comes back, they basically certified that's good to go. Then it comes down to North Carolina. North Carolina then, on its own, independently, doesn't have to, but does, certifies it again through our own processes, independent of what had happened before that. So essentially, when those systems come into use in North Carolina, they're checked multiple times in different ways to ensure that they're the right equipment and they're doing what they're designed to do. So I think from an integrity standpoint, it's really important to understand that there's multiple checkpoints to get to a point where something is in use in North Carolina. It's not just an arbitrary decision. So then let's talk about the hacking of voting machines and things like that for just a moment. So how many of you have, show of hands, how many of you have seen the DEF CON Voting Village videos from the cybersecurity conference out there? Anybody?
I have.
There's a few
Tori,
people.
that's it.
So can they be hacked? The answer has to be yes, because if you go and look up those videos, they have hacked them. But at the same time, you have to understand the context of what that looks like too. So from perspective, I've been out at DEF CON yearly since before the Voting Village ever even took place. And it's at current a place I stop by every single year I go out there, because I'm interested in what they're doing, if they're finding new vulnerabilities, how they're working through and getting the results that they're getting on these different systems. So I watch that stuff very closely, and I think one thing to keep in mind, a lot of those systems are old and outdated. So that's the first thing, and especially when it comes to North Carolina, those ballot marking devices, the things that you go and put your vote into, those are not in use in North Carolina. Unfortunately, there's other states where that may not be the case. It's a state-by-state decision, and in North Carolina, a county-by-county decision in terms of how those devices are used, what devices they're using. As long as they're approved for use at the state level, then the counties have the ability to choose at that point. So The next piece that I think is really important around those systems is that there are tons and tons and tons of audits, controls, both from a process procedure and from a physical security standpoint, that are designed to keep those machines out of the hands of folks who are going to do those malicious things to those machines. That is one component of it. It doesn't matter how good any of that is, that given enough time, resources, money, there's probably a way to hack into it. I mean, the Pentagon has been hacked. If you look at the news on that, and you look at things like SolarWinds and some of the other stuff that has come out from a vulnerability standpoint, it is hard to do cybersecurity. It doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. It means we really do need to do it, and we need to try to do it right at a programmatic level. So we're looking at, from a physical controls, who has access to what machines, and from a process and a policy standpoint, what are the processes and procedures for somebody who's going to actually take those machines, take them to a polling station? How do they get tested before they actually go out there? How do they get tested after they come back to make sure nothing has gone on with them that would be inappropriate? I think those are all really foundational things to just be aware of, that there's a lot more that goes into the process than it might appear at a surface level.
The questions are starting to pour in. Thank you so much. Continue to write them down on flashcards, or I'll bring the mic around. But I want to start to get to some of them. Bob and Eddie, I think this first one is up your alley. It deals with voter ID. North Carolina voters clearly indicated they wanted IDs required for voting, but that was overturned by the court. Why and how does the voter ID requirement get reinstated? They also put on here that they don't think candidates should pledge not to question election results if they feel there are legitimate concerns. The question, though, was about voter ID. Why was it overturned, and how could it possibly be reinstated?
You want to go first?
Yeah, you got the mic.
Okay.
Yeah.
There are 2 lawsuits currently pending challenging the voter ID laws. First, a little bit of background. You will remember that in 2018, you had the opportunity to vote for constitutional amendments to our Constitution, one of which was an amendment that required the General Assembly to adopt a voter ID law. A lawsuit was filed challenging that constitutional amendment on the grounds that the General Assembly that authorized it was illegally constituted. The General Assembly that authorized that particular amendment was one of the gerrymandered legislatures. And the Supreme Court concluded that it might be that that vote was flawed, and sent it back to the trial court to examine in more detail the circumstances surrounding the adoption of the voter ID amendment. Separate from that, a lawsuit was filed challenging the voter ID amendment on the grounds that it discriminated against African American citizens. A trial court had agreed with that proposition, and that case is in front of the state Supreme Court and will be argued next week.
In October.
In October.
Yeah, I think early October. Yeah.
So there are 2 lawsuits out there. How do we reinstitute the voter ID statute? Once this litigation is cleared, if the Constitution does in fact require the General Assembly to have a voter ID law, the General Assembly will adopt a voter ID law. If the lawsuit challenging the present law as racially discriminatory is upheld, the General Assembly will need to amend the law, the voter ID law, to put in place proper protections. But I think it is correct that North Carolina will have a voter ID law. It will not be in place this election, but perhaps it will be in place at the next election.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that the photo ID requirement was a law passed by the General Assembly. And I think I'm correct, and my fellow attorneys up here can correct me if I'm not. It had a variety of types of photo IDs that could be used, and the argument against it was, well, it's not inclusive enough, or it discriminates against some people that, you know, for whatever reason don't have driver's license or other types of IDs. I think Jennifer didn't agree with me when I said this at an earlier forum. You know, to me, and this is Bob's personal opinion, if the General Assembly would appropriate the money and provide everybody with a standardized voter ID, it seems to me some of the controversy over, you know, the types of ID would be resolved. You know, that way, rich, poor, you know, east, west, whatever, you know, you register to vote, you get an ID card and you don't have to worry about going and getting it. I do want to respond, Joe, to the second question about our principles in that candidates should accept the results. There are a multitude of legal procedures for any candidate to challenge an election, and consistently they've done so. There's a process, there's a time frame and a process through the courts. So the principles aren't saying don't do that if you think there's something wrong. What they're saying is use the legal process, and you know, you'll get an answer. You may agree, you may not agree, but once, you know, and I think the best example in our history was Bush v. Gore, where the case went all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. They made a decision. It affected the outcome of the 2000 presidential election. There was the process that was followed. Not everybody was happy with the result, but what our principles say is if you follow the process, you accept the result. So I hope that clarifies, I think, where we are on the principles in the life. Right, John? Yeah.
One thing where you do have to show a photo ID is if you are doing same-day voter registration. Since that is a process where you want to be sure the person can vote, they must have a photo ID and proof of residency, which can be a bill, can be a lease, but it is more difficult if you are doing same-day registration. And it takes 2 days to run through to make sure if you are in the felon database. Some felons can now vote, others cannot. But there is a check on that, and there is also a check to make sure that you are a citizen. So while photo IDs are not required if you walk into your polling place on election day, they are required if you attempt to do a same-day registration. So that's something to keep in mind.
Adam, we just got a couple of questions here about poll workers and poll watchers. Would you mind, before I ask the question, just explaining the difference between a poll worker and a poll watcher?
Yeah, absolutely. Basically, poll watchers are people who are outside the polling place. They can be, you know, as long as they're out. We have between a 25 to 50 foot buffer zone outside of a voting polling place. They can watch who's going in to vote, and things like that. That's fine. We have no problem with that. As long as they're outside the buffer zone, that they can do whatever. Inside the polling place, we have what we call observers, which are a group of, it can be either 10 at-large polling place observers or site-specific, precinct-specific observers. And these are given to us by both the Republican and the Democrat, the county parties. They have to provide a list the Thursday before Election Day to basically let us know these are their list of observers. These are people who have been appointed by the county parties to actually go into a polling place. Once they're in a polling place, once they're on the list of observers, they can observe. That's pretty much what they can do. If there's an issue, they can't talk to the voter, they can't talk to anybody working, they can talk to the chief judge. If there's, they can take notes, observe the voting process. They can't interfere with voters and the voting process, but they can observe the whole polling place process. And I always tell my county party chairs in Gaston County, if there's an issue, if your observer sees something, let me know. We want to do this. We want to do this as fair as we possibly can. If there's something that your observer sees that they don't like, let me know. I'm the person in the county that can make the adjustment if we need to, and I have in the past. So those are important things to know, that the observers, they can only observe. We don't want them interfering with the voting process, and we've had to call some observers down, and because they're getting in between voters, or they're at the check-in station, with sensitive voter information there. So we want to make sure that they just observe the process and they report back to the county party chairs, and then the party chairs will contact me, and then we'll make adjustments if we need to. So,
are there any concerns that these poll watchers may be antagonistic or interfere with the voter? In Gaston and Mecklenburg County, have there been any incidents of this? And I'm also curious, have you seen more people volunteer or express an interest in being a poll watcher or an observer?
Well, the one thing about poll watchers and poll observers are that the Board of Elections, we have nothing to do with that. We oftentimes get calls about people wanting to be a poll watcher or observer. That's done through the county political parties. We have nothing to do with that. We don't assign them. We have nothing to do with observers in that sense. The thing about voter intimidation or problems with poll watchers, we have minor instances, and we always tell our chief judges, if you have an instance, go talk to them, go talk to the poll watcher, find out if they can watch what they're doing, watch their behavior, things like that. And we've not had to call. Well, I take that back. We have had to call police in some cases, just for potential voter intimidation things. But I always tell people, and I tell candidates about this all the time, the people who are working, the electioneers, the campaigners who are out there, grinding for votes, trying to get people to vote for them, this kind of thing, voter intimidation, things like that, or being aggressive with voters, you're only going to lose votes. I tell them this all the time. You want to make sure that the people who are out there campaigning in your name are actually helping you and not hurting you. And we've had instances of electioneers who are just overly aggressive. And my office is an early voting site. People get out of their cars and the campaigners are on them just like bees to honey. And I tell candidates all the time, don't do that. Let the voter, if the voter wants to come to you, if they want to, get the material, they will. If not, just leave them alone. You're going to lose votes. It happens every time. That's the last thing that a voter sees before they enter that voting enclosure. That's not the impression you want to give. So,
Joe, can I add
Absolutely.
one quick thing that I heard another election lawyer at one of our prior events say that there's a deadline for the list. And if you're not on the list and you show up and want to be a watcher, the Board of Elections cannot let you be a watcher. And so it's important, that people understand if you want to be a poll watcher, you need to contact your party chair and make sure your name is on the list for that. And also, Phil Strack, who is probably one of the most prominent Republican lawyers in the state, said at one of our earlier events that he trains poll watchers as part of the GOP program, and that it is critical that they do exactly what Adam was saying. You go where you're supposed to go, you don't interfere, you don't talk, and that if you do, they have every right and responsibility to remove you. So it's an important process, but there's a structure to it.
Exactly.
And there is a difference. A poll watcher can stand outside 25 feet away as much as they want, but if you want to be an observer, if you want to be inside, then you need to talk to your political party and say that you volunteer. In Mecklenburg, we have had issues with over-aggressive folks out there for candidates and upon occasion for poll workers. The notion is to try to de-escalate that initially, and if that doesn't work, we call the ship. But it's a very few times in every election. But the whole notion is don't create a larger problem than it is. So if there's a poll watcher or somebody working for a candidate out there, quite often, if the judge goes out and speaks with them, the problem takes care of itself. Because some people just get overly excited about their candidate.
Yep.
Or about what they see is going on.
Yep.
That's a key. And presumably a poll watcher, if they wanted to, could call their party and say, I saw this outside of the election process. So a poll watcher can still report what they see. They just can't go inside.
Our next question is on security. I think John, Adam, and Tori might be able to answer this one. Can you describe the security to ensure the integrity of votes on the flash drive from the polling places to the Board of Elections?
Okay. I'll talk about the physical security, and you handle the cybersecurity stuff. Physical security, the chief judges at each of our polling places are responsible for that flash drive. Once the flash drive, and we've mentioned this before, it is not connected to the internet. There's no connection whatsoever. It is a physical flash drive. It is a very secure flash drive that I pay $160 a piece for a little 8 gig flash drive. So they're very expensive flash drives. And they're secure. So what they do is the chief judge there's a whole process of how they secure those at the end of the night, and then they drive them immediately to the Board of Elections office where we take them, we process them. My deputy and I, we make sure that there's nothing odd about the flash drive, that it's not been tampered with or anything like that, and it's in a sealed bag. The chief judge and the judges, they seal that bag, so they know that bag has been secured and the chain of custody has not been broken. And once we get that, we process it into what we call our Unity computer, which is basically, we call it Election Central. It's where the results, it's not, the computer is not connected to any internet or anything like that. It is a hardened computer, so it is, and Tori can probably talk about this, it is probably the hardest computer to get into in our office, and very few people have access to it. And that flash drive, we put it into the computer, and it tabulates the results, and then we verify that the results on that flash drive match the tape. That it's a roll of tape that has the results on it, and we make sure that tape matches what's on the tabulator. So, and Tori can probably talk about the cybersecurity aspect.
You covered most of it, because again, it's not connected, so there's not a whole lot from that aspect of it. I think the one thing to add, though, is the flash drives are not flash drives you would go out and buy at Walmart. They're certified. Yep. They are very special flash drives, and they're only used once, because that way we know when Adam pulls that flash drive out, he knows it's good. He knows it is going to be used for this purpose alone, and then it isn't used again. They're expensive because of all the back-end process and supply chain security and certification that goes into those flash drives, even being able to be used in those systems. So it's an expensive process, but it's one that helps ensure that those devices are secure and they can be used in this manner.
We're going to phone a friend for the next question. Thank you so much for volunteering to speak into the microphone. What's your name and what is your question?
So my name is Teresa Carter. I look around the room and I see a lot of people that I know. I appreciate you all coming and spending some time in Gaston County first and foremost, right? So my question, my question is not about the safety of elections. Myself personally, I feel like they are very safe. My question is specifically to this process. So I look around the room and I see I'm the only person of color here. I look at the panel and I don't see anyone that looks like me either. I feel like where this location is, it is the least accessible to other persons that look like me. So my question to the group is, how do you plan on getting this information to other persons and other places that it might be more accessible to?
Thank you so much for bringing that up. I forgot to introduce by saying that exact answer. I get to answer a question. So Bob and I have worked very hard to try to put together 15 panels with 7 or 8 speakers on each panel in the space of 6 weeks. And we try very hard to balance it with women, people of color, to represent our state. Because of the rapid, need to put things together in people's schedules, this panel is way too male, I will admit.
And old.
Old, white, male.
No offense, we love our men.
No offense taken.
But we have had amazing women on other panels and women of color. U.S. Attorney for the Western North Carolina, Dina King, was phenomenal last night in terms of voting rights. She was incredible. The way you can also see is we're going to have a virtual event on Monday night. It's on that same website, nctrustelections.com. You can register right there and get the Zoom link. Even if you can't watch it live, you'll get the recording. And our wonderful Gaston County folks are recording tonight's event. So all those great questions being answered, please tell your friends and neighbors. It's going to be on the government channel for Gaston County. And we really appreciate you all being here. But absolutely, we have tried very hard to be balanced. Our state has a lot of diversity. We have a lot of really powerful women and people of color and attorneys, and this just happened to look like this tonight. So I apologize.
And I might say that the other 2 Democrats on the Mecklenburg Board of Elections are black females. And one of them was on the panel last night in Mecklenburg, and the other one is in Albemarle on the panel. So they have kept that in mind.
Yeah, and let me just add for location-wise, we tried to set it up conceptually, one for each congressional district. Some congressional districts have multiple counties, 12, 14, 15 counties. Where do you go in District 1, which is essentially all of northeastern North Carolina? We picked Edenton. This congressional district is part of Mecklenburg, part of Gaston. And we were scrambling. We didn't want to do everyone in a large urban setting, but it was tempting to do it at every university in the state, because then we could drag in students who had, who were getting credit for coming out to it. So we tried to pick. Yeah, well, you can build a crowd that way. So what we tried to do, for better or worse, you look at this district, Belmont. Okay, let's go to Belmont. Without any real understanding, accessibility to it. So we tried, and I do want to say on behalf of the Carter Center, this is a pilot project. They're looking for the next election cycle to taking what they learned in North Carolina, what they learned in the other 3 states that are involved in this, and expanding this concept nationwide so that people all across this country have a better understanding, a better appreciation of the incredible importance of the election system and how the people who run it do it in a safe, secure way. So, and you know, I apologize for being up here with all these people. So. Not really. No.
I'll read the microphone. I've got the voice. Can everybody hear me? First of all, I'm Nancy Moore. I have a member of the Gaston County Board of the Elections. And the idea that I think works with this, and I'm going to put Teresa present up. She noticed, I did not notice. But we can take this as a house party concept. Every person here can take this into their community, into their area, and perhaps the Gaston County Board of Elections or the station staff can help. Not that they're not busy doing other things, but again, spread the word amongst. It's called personal networking, I believe is the name for it, where you go out and tell people what you've learned.
Thank you. And I'm going to take 1 second and recognize Mayor to Mayor, another former mayor, Richard Boyce. Thank you for taking your time.
The next two questions kind of go hand in hand. They deal with unaffiliated voters. There are so many of them now, probably plenty of them in the room right now. Should there be unaffiliated representation on boards of election? And then going off that, when there is a debate or differing opinions by the Republicans and Democrats reviewing the mail-in ballots, how does that tie get broken, and how often does this happen? John G., that one was directed directly to you, the mail-in ballot question. But I believe anyone can really jump in here on the question about unaffiliated representation.
Eddie's already got the mic ready. So.
Yeah, he's big on this. We have had no problems with the mail-in ballots. We check them, one Democrat and one Republican. And usually I'm the one separating them while the 4 women on the board make that decision. So I don't see in the long run it would be a problem having an unaffiliated member. I would note that most unaffiliated voters have a preference. I don't know how many of you are unaffiliated voters, but my guess is if you are, you typically see the world maybe as a Democrat would view it or as a Republican. So I don't think there's a problem with that, but I don't see that that has caused us any problems. And since there's a Republican member of the board here, do you see any problem with that?
She's a Democrat. Nancy's a Democrat.
Oh, you're a Democrat. Sorry.
Yeah.
Oh, my Lord. We're glad you're here.
And I do think that with the growth of the unaffiliated voters, they need to have representation on boards that make decisions about elections. Okay. Now, it's going to require legislation, I assume, to change that. Okay. And who's going to do it? And then the other question related to unaffiliated voters is, if an unaffiliated voter wants to be an observer, okay, wants to be a watcher, can they go through the party? In other words, if I'm an unaffiliated voter and I go to, I say I want to be an observer, can I go to the Democrat or Republican party chair and say, appoint me as an observer?
I would say yes.
If the party's willing to table.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know there's 3 attorneys up here, and they'll probably, they're probably smarter about this. But yeah, I mean, if an unaffiliated voter goes to a party chair, now the party chairs don't have to appoint them, and we don't know if they would or not. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that would be a problem. We've actually had, oh goodness, I'm trying to, 2015 or 2016, we actually had a couple of unaffiliated voters appointed observers by one of the parties in Gaston. So it has happened. It can happen. So.
And they can be appointed to be In fact,
And-
I would say a good portion of Gaston counties are unaffiliated.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely.
So let me talk a minute about unaffiliated voters. Unaffiliated voters, as we speak, are the largest subset of voters in North Carolina. There are more unaffiliated voters than registered Republicans and registered Democrats. Our state statute currently essentially bars unaffiliated voters from serving on the State Board of Elections. The statutes say there will be 3 appointed by the governor's party and 2 appointed by the other party. And now, for a disclosure, I am currently representing, along with some other lawyers, a group of unaffiliated voters who have filed a lawsuit in federal court contending that North Carolina's law barring unaffiliated voters from serving on a state board of elections is unconstitutional, violates several provisions of the federal Constitution. That lawsuit was just filed. It will be a while before it is resolved. It is a very interesting question. There's no lawsuit like it in the country as we speak, and none in the past. So stay tuned. We will find out. And one other point, for a period of 6 months, our legislature actually provided that there would be 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans, and 1 unaffiliated voter on the State Board of Elections. That lasted 6 months. It was quickly changed by the General Assembly, and we're back where we were. But stay tuned.
Yeah, real quick. I think from the standpoint of trusted elections, we would probably be well served if each election board included an unaffiliated voter. I mean, there is a perception if the vote splits 3-2 along party lines that it's a political decision, and the people in the minority party are going to be upset about it. If you have unaffiliated voters, even if they have leanings one way or the other, I think it would help strengthen confidence in the non-political decision-making process. And so I think I can only wish my friend Eddie good luck in his litigation, even though I think the parties are not in favor of it.
And Eddie, there are a lot of barriers to an unaffiliated candidate running in a partisan election. I think about Jennifer Moxley in Charlotte. She wanted to run for a Charlotte City Council seat. She's unaffiliated. The Democrats in that race, they just went down to the Board of Elections, paid $100 or so. They were on the ballot, and she would have had to collect 3,000 signatures or so just to qualify for the primary. She's a single mom. She has a full-time job, and there was just no way she was able to collect that amount of signatures in such a short amount of time. Is your lawsuit at the heart of that? Would your lawsuit address that, make ballot access easier for unaffiliated candidates?
No, this lawsuit is a very narrow lawsuit. The only issue is whether or not the state statute that requires the State Board of Elections to include only Democrats and Republicans is unconstitutional. There are other instances. Local boards of election, the statutes actually require 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats, but the governor appoints the chair, and it does not require the governor to appoint a Democrat or Republican. As it turns out, the current governor has only appointed Democrats, but that's for another day. The unaffiliated candidate issue is a very interesting issue. It's very hard for unaffiliated voters to get to run for office, and an interesting issue that's coming up. I think we're going to hear more about this. Judges. We elect judges in partisan elections. And I think we would all prefer that our judges be unaffiliated. But it's essentially impossible for an unaffiliated candidate to get his or her name on the ballot as a judge. And maybe the General Assembly will address that. Make it easier for judges to run for office as unaffiliated candidates. I think it would be good for us.
And I mean, you know, in municipal elections in Gaston County, I know it's not the same in Charlotte or in Mecklenburg County, but unaffiliated can run for municipal elections. Our municipal elections in every, all 13 towns in Gaston County, they are nonpartisan, so there is no party affiliation with them. Also, the soil and water conservation supervisors, they're also nonpartisan, so unaffiliates can run for that. School board in Gaston County, and I know it's not the same, a lot of counties have partisan school board. Our school board is a nonpartisan race, so unaffiliates can run. So there are opportunities for unaffiliated candidates to actually get on the ballot, but you know, like Joe mentioned, it is very difficult. The unaffiliates, it requires 4% of the jurisdictions of signatures to obtain petition signatures, 4% of the jurisdiction. So it is a high threshold, a high number to achieve. So.
Let's change gears now and talk about fraud. We've all heard this in the news, especially lately. You know, we could think back to the 9th Congressional District, the election fraud that occurred there. That really started, one of the questions was, how did that happen? And as the reporter involved in that story, I have intimate knowledge of this case. But to summarize, basically it dealt with people going around to collect absentee ballots, which is illegal in North Carolina. And there were questions over whether those ballots that were collected, did they end up to the Board of Elections, were they tampered with, were they opened, things along that nature. The State Board of Elections held a hearing, and a new election was ordered. By the time the hearing was over, both candidates agreed that there was enough doubt about the election that there should be another election. But I'm curious for the panelists here, what has been your experience with fraud in North Carolina elections? Does voter fraud happen? Are we talking small scale here? What type of cases have you seen over the years?
I'm going to start off. One thing that came out, and Joe, I know you're intimately involved familiar with the congressional district. One thing that actually came out, a good thing that came out of that, prior to the 8th or 9th congressional district issue, one thing that the Board of Elections does, we produce. This is before, not now. You could request a list. People could request a list of people who did actually request an absentee ballot. So that way, you know, you knew exactly who requested them, and that's kind of what happened with in this case, where they knew who requested the ballot, and they just went to their home and got the information. One thing that came about after that is the General Assembly actually passed laws that prevented that made it that list a confidential list. So we have, you know, within the Board of Elections, we have access to that, but we can't give that list to anybody. So that is actually a good thing that came out of a bad situation. So
right, and then the 9th district, what the candidate was doing and what the operative was doing was they were looking at that list. They were able to see every single person who requested a mail ballot, and that's how they knew to go to their home to knock on the door and ask for their vote.
One point that was made in one of our earlier forums was, you know, you want to vote twice? Is it worth going to jail for a felony? I mean, there's a real disincentive, you know, on a small scale basis to engage in some sort of election fraud. And, you know, historically, sure, there have been instances in particularly smaller rural counties or more impoverished areas or nursing homes where residents were vulnerable to people, you know, abusing the absentee system. But 2 points. One, we continue to strengthen the laws and the procedures to catch people if they do that. And then there's also, this is just a random sidebar, in Edenton, a lady said, I want to know, why did I get 16 absentee ballots? and she got 16 applications for absentee ballots.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's a whole different world. The parties, the candidates, outside groups may send you multiple applications for you to submit an absentee ballot, but Adam's office is only going to send you one.
Send you one.
And so, there's a misconception, a misunderstanding, I think, about the whole absentee process. But security is so much better, and the laws are so much tougher. It's pretty minimal, I think.
Yeah, the county recycling plant
Yeah.
made a lot off of me from those. I think I got 20 in the 2020 election.
And let me just make a quick observation. I think we've been remarkably lucky here in North Carolina. We've had a few problems. And I think one of the reasons is the General Assembly has authorized every registered voter to appear at a polling place and challenge the capacity of people to vote on grounds you're not a U.S. citizen, you are not 18, you're not a resident, you're dead. But I think that mechanism, that authorization, that ability of every person to help police the security and accuracy and validity of our elections, I think is a very positive thing. So I think we shouldn't forget that.
And I would note that we check after the election to determine if someone died before Election Day.
Yep.
And under the law of North Carolina, that vote doesn't count. We also do something else that unfortunately has changed in part. We sent to nursing homes and other places where people were going to vote by mail, we send a Democrat and a Republican to that facility to be with that voter to determine that they are going to have an accurate vote. Now, the legislature has changed that to allow more people to do that, and I was not excited by that change because I thought this gave us a lot of confidence that if you were in a facility and wanted to vote, your vote was going to be what you wanted it to be. I think it may still be, but now others can do that. And I did not think that was a good change. I want to see what Adam thinks.
I generally don't comment on law changes by the General Assembly. My staff knows how I feel on these issues, but MAT teams, multi-partisan assistance teams is what John's referring to. They're groups and bipartisan. Both Republicans and Democrats, they go out and assist people who live in facilities with requesting an absentee ballot, helping them register to vote, requesting absentee ballots, and also helping them complete their ballot as well. So we have a really, really strong MAT team presence in Gaston County that's really good. So we've, as to John's point about the MAT, the General Assembly did change the law a little bit. It's designed in essence to allow more people to assist a voter with helping complete a ballot. And at the end of the day, we want the strongest possible system, regardless of anything. We don't want fraud. We are actively, we mentioned, my post-election audits. I became elections director in Gaston County in 2011, so 11 years ago. Where we've been, at that point to where we are now, we are miles away, much better. The system is stronger. Our post-election audits are stronger. We are catching more things. It is a strong system, and a lot of the stuff, I appreciate this tour that Mayor Roberts and Judge Warren are doing, because it basically tells citizens what we do behind the scenes. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes. We're not going to give away all, our secrets of what we're looking for with post-election audits and everything. But it is a strong system. It is a very, very strong system. So.
And just a couple of things to add on to that is dovetailing into what Adam had really kind of alluded there. Elections for us is not a single day a year. This is a full-time job, day in and day out. People are working on this stuff year long. So even though you show up for your day at the polls and your day to vote, that's awesome. Please do that. But keep in mind, there's a lot of people supporting that initiative year-round to try and make this system work for all of us. And one other thing to note around the fraud piece of it, because I think in North Carolina, this is maybe not the only state that has it, but certainly there's not a lot that I know of that have it, is a dedicated election fraud and investigations group within the State Board of Elections. There's a team of folks in the State Board of Elections that their sole function is to work in that space and to try and track down things that might constitute fraud and do that investigative work. They have law enforcement backgrounds, so they're familiar with the processes and procedures that go into those types of activities. And they, on District 9 activities, they were very heavily involved in that. I think that's something that isn't really widely known about North Carolina. So.
We have two more questions, and we'll get to the one in the audience here. We'll go to the one in the audience first here, and then we'll get to the last two flashcards here. Hello, what's your name?
I'm Joanne.
I feel like a game show host.
Yes, you are. I have read that Judicial Watch took actions that prompted North Carolina to eliminate 200,000 names from its voter rolls, cleaning up its rolls in the state. Are you familiar with that? And if so, what kinds of things have been put in place to eliminate those issues again?
It's probably Adam, I think you probably know more about that.
Yeah, I know the lawsuits and everything. I will say this: the list maintenance procedures that we do in the counties. It is a very extensive process. We every 2 years after a general election, we basically all inactive voters. If they've been inactive for 2 years, if they haven't voted in a federal election in 2 years, they're removed from our voter rolls. And a lot of it is, it could be something to, non-controversial as somebody passed away in another state, and we weren't notified of it in the state. Basically, to not be able to vote in an election, or to be removed from the rolls, I'll say, you couldn't have voted in 4 federal elections. And what happens is, if you've not voted in 2 federal elections, your voter status goes from active to inactive. And then after that, after 2 more federal elections, that's when we remove you. Our list maintenance procedures, we do it, it's a daily thing. We receive lists of, deceased voters from the Register of Deeds office. If a death certificate was filed in the county Register of Deeds office, our office receives that, and we remove that voter. If the Department of Health and Human Services at the state level, they send us lists to remove voters. So it's an ongoing, constant process of removing voters. As far as the Judicial Watch, I think it was directed more at other counties, not Gaston County. Harnett, Moore. I briefly read the case a while back, but our list maintenance procedures are very strong. I joke that my father-in-law and in-law and my wife is actually from Illinois. And I always give them a hard time about dead people voting and things like that. And it doesn't. The list maintenance procedures in North Carolina are very, very strong, and we don't have that. We actually have probably some of the strongest voter rolls in the entire country, to be honest. So. Thanks.
Next question is about local tabulation. The writer asks, I have a few concerns regarding local tabulation. My concern is more systemic, for example, judicial review. How can the average citizen help protect one person, one vote?
I guess that's me again. I mentioned earlier, our board meetings, we're as transparent as they come. We always, and I know Nancy, my board member, will attest to this, we want visitors. We want people to come to our meetings. We want them to understand the process. The premise of one person, one vote, as it relates to, people voting twice, what was the question again?
Yeah, how can the average person protect one person, one vote?
Yeah, get involved in the process is the best way to do it. We're always looking for precinct workers. Come work for us. We will pay you a little bit to help with the process. Come to our board meetings a little bit. It's not a lot. So, you're not going to get rich being a precinct worker. But, get involved in the process. I always say, if you have questions about the process, about anything we do, about anything elections related, call me, email me. I will gladly explain what we do and how we, what we do and what my staff does and what our precinct workers do. I would rather people, ask questions. I would want them, there's a thing, and we learned this at a conference recently, there's a thing between misinformation and disinformation, okay? Disinformation is just blatantly not telling the truth about elections. Misinformation is truly people who want to know, who don't know about the process. And that's what we want to do. We want to, educate. One of my biggest jobs, and my staff will tell you this, one of my biggest jobs that I think I have as elections director is to educate voters. I want smart voters. I want voters who want to know about the process. That's my ultimate goal, and I'll do anything I can. I will sit down. I will give you a tour of our facility. I will show you voting machines. I will tell and I will talk about more about voting and elections than you'll ever want to know. And you'll come out of there hopefully more educated about the process. My staff is smiling and because they hear this all the time. So, but I want to educate. That's my ultimate goal. So.
Yeah, I'm going to put an unsolicited plug in and say that we have an incredibly fast-growing state, and you live in one of the fastest-growing areas probably in the country. Again, I go back to that 7.4 million people registered to vote. Our election staffs at the county level have really not been able to keep up staff-wise, technology-wise, funding-wise, to make sure we have safe, secure, and fair elections. And I mean, they do an incredible job, but they're operating on budgets in staffing from 10 years ago or 15 years ago, and all the technological changes that we're seeing. So I really would encourage you to talk to your county officials, your state representatives, the people that provide funding for the election system, to make sure that they're adequately funded and staffed. And I think that will serve you, and it certainly will serve our democracy to do so.
And the one other thing I would say, the way the rolls are kept, it is very difficult to vote twice. That's your problem, because in every election, if you voted, that is recorded. And it is done in such a way that if you try to vote again, if you succeed and think you voted twice, your vote isn't going to count. If you vote once and try to vote twice and told you can't, then your vote will continue to count. But there is processes to make sure that you only get to vote once. And the one other thing I'd say about North Carolina, I think we are very lucky to have a state board of elections rather than having a person who's an elected politician in charge of the election process. Because by having it the way we do, I think we are less likely to be having the issues that you have in states where there's a single person who ultimately controls the elections. We don't have that in North Carolina. We have a 5-member state board, we have 5-member county boards. And I think that makes a big difference.
And we've had that for 100 years.
Yeah. And I'll give you a good example. People in my position, like I'll talk about the state of Florida, people at the supervisors of elections in Florida, at the county level, they're elected. I am not elected. If I ever have to run for an office, I am running away from this, okay? And you know, and like I said, I'm a nationally certified elections director, so I see these, my colleagues at these national conferences and things like that, and we always talk about, you know, what do you do when your name is on the ballot? You know, as far as touching ballots, you know, mailing out absentee ballots and things like that. And it is a complicated process for them. And you know, so that is one thing that's really, really good about North Carolina is we don't have an elected Secretary of State. We don't have, I guess Secretary of State is probably the most prominent elected official that handles elections. We don't. We have an executive director of the State Board of Elections who I've known Karen Bell for many, many years. She was a former county elections director. She was me in Transylvania County. And just a great person. And the thing about Karen is she wants to do good. She wants to do the right thing. And I think that's what we all do. And like I said, you know, our boards of elections are chosen by political parties. Staff is not. I am as unaffiliated a voter as you possibly could find. I like to say I dislike both parties equally, and that is the truth. My job is to make the voting process and the experience a positive one for all voters, regardless of party. So.
Elaine Marshall has no power over elections in North
whatsoever.
Carolina, but her office gets a lot of calls from people who are confused about this.
Question, and that was a poorly framed question by me. I think the one person, one vote got us off target. I really am concerned about elections of the people and by the people, and I just want to alert folks, I have very little concern about local elections, thanks to Mr. Reagan and Mr. Krass's oversight. But I hope everyone here knows that North Carolina is a test case for larger issues, one of which is who has final authority to judge whether elections are free and fair. We've got another case coming before the Supreme Court of the country regarding whether the state legislature or our judicial branch makes decisions about gerrymandering. We are a battleground state, and I hope everyone gets out and votes, but I hope everyone in North Carolina also realizes we are a test case for these large issues about how we vote as a democracy, and I hope we all stay alert and engaged, and I thank you all for being here tonight.
Just to wrap things up, you know, I believe most people are good, and, you know, a lot of people are confused. They see things online, they're not sure if it's true. It was first time mail voting for so many people in 2020, and you know, they just don't know the ins and outs of the election. So heading into the midterms and into 2024, how are you personally, you know, letting the wide-scale public and population know about these security procedures and how people can trust that their vote counts, particularly with Mecklenburg and Gaston counties? Are you doing PSAs, social media campaigns? How are you getting this message out to the public?
So jump in on this first and say, Adam mentioned mis and disinformation. That's a real thing, real threat. There's a lot of info out there that is just not true. That's going around constantly, and it's shaping how people view the election. It's shaping all kinds of things, and they're not really in a positive way right now. So one of the things as an individual, make sure where you're getting your information, get it from an official source. Go to ncsbe.gov or your county election website. Look at the material that's out there, and especially if you're concerned about election security. I know there's a section on the state site that talks about the processes that are in place, that talks about cybersecurity around elections. No, it does not go into the weeds, and it does not tell you every single thing down to the technology and processes at that level, but it gives you an idea of the processes that we're going through and that we have awareness around it, and we're trying to make those improvements. And that is crucial to get information from good, valid sources. So with that.
Exactly, and that's one thing that we fight on a daily basis is disinformation. There's just, at the end of the day, people are going to believe what they're going to believe, and there's nothing that I can say or do to prevent that. I try, believe me, I try. We have a very active social media presence, and we put out the truth. What's really happening, our processes. I am 100% transparent. If somebody has a question about what we do or how we do it or our machines or something, call me, email me. I will be more than happy to answer any questions. But, and I've told staff this, we can tell people our process and how we do things until we're blue in the face. If people aren't willing to accept what we're telling them as truth, that's a lot of the issue that we have. And how do we fight that? That's a great question. We try. Believe me, we do try. So, yep.
I would say, and one thing that Adam said that you think, well, we have these flash drives. When they leave the precinct, they are in a sealed container.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Why is that? So there couldn't be anything happening with another flash drive. I think North Carolina tries every time to find a better way to make sure people feel that they're secure. And disinformation is a real threat to full and fair elections. So as you talk to your friends and you hear things that you don't jive with what you've heard tonight, it is good to say, why don't you call and find out, because that's not what I heard.
Well, I'm just delighted I had a chance to hear from John and Adam and Tori. They were remarkable presentations.
Well, I hope our 14th Congressional District Tour has helped to some degree to enlighten the general public about these. But you have the opportunity in all 100 counties to get correct information. It's simply the process of asking. And I compliment each of you for coming out tonight. We were on a call with the Stanley County Director who was talking about they had these open house events to ask people, come in. We'll show you how the machines work, and nobody shows up. You can't learn if you don't show up. You can't learn if you don't ask the questions. And you've got the resources. And so I compliment you again for coming out tonight, but go out and spread the word that if you've got concerns, there are people here who are experts who are going to answer those questions for you.
Thank you.
You've done a great job.
Oh, thank you. You guys are wonderful. These were fantastic questions. Thank you so much for being an engaged audience, and thank you to our panel as well. It's hard to believe, but people are already voting. Overseas voters are sending in their ballots. Hundreds of people have already cast their votes, and really we'll have early in-person voting before you know it. So thank you for coming out tonight. I'm going to bring back up Jennifer to close us out here.
Oh, yeah. Thank you. Wow. We have just great people, great media, great experts, cybersecurity, attorneys, and staff workers working for our state. We are really lucky. We've heard it from both sides of the aisle, and unaffiliated folks too, that we have a great system here. Let's protect it, let's share it, let's get good information out. And we have one more person in our group from the Carter Center who's helping out that didn't get recognized. David Capon, give him a big hand. He's done all the legwork of finding the facilities and helping get information out to speakers, and he's been the logistics guru, so we couldn't do it without him. But thank you so much on behalf of the Carter Center. Let's go out and support democracy. Take care.